Oh, I missed it. I try to start the recording right after the ding and I forgot. But welcome to another Friday episode of Engagement That Scales with Rachel Hoppy. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Shannon. Happy Friday to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not that that means much these days, but maybe it does. And we'll talk about that in a bit with Heather. But Heather, it's so nice to have you here because it's been a while since we've caught up. And when you keynoted at Connect a year and a half ago, you just like lit everybody up in the room because you put into words what a lot of the community program leaders and managers that we talk to are kind of seeing but couldn't kind of articulate all the time. I mean, they're actually feeling it probably more than being able to talk about it, but they were like, yes, finally somebody understands my pain. So it's great to have you here. Since we've caught up, you have launched a book. So why don't you talk about a little bit what you've been up to, a little bit about the book, and what's on your mind lately?
Okay, so since we last spoke, which was 2018, was it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's about 2 years ago. I've been traveling all over the globe speaking like crazy, which has been a blessing and a lot of fun. And I'm now got my wings clipped like everybody else, and I'm learning to adapt to virtual and doing a lot of that as well. Yes, as you noted, we Chris Shipley and I launched our book April 14th. And if you're looking to launch a book, thank you. I would say avoid the global pandemic. It's not the ideal.
I mean, you know, I've been writing a book for like a year and a half, and it's taking so long that I think I'm going to get the timing just right.
Yeah, there you go. Avoid it. But if you're going to launch in the middle of a global pandemic, the Adaptation Advantage, and we went through about 100 different titles, is oddly and eerily well-timed for this moment. Not only the title, but also the content. So it's really about a lot of the things I've been speaking about for a couple of years now, that we're coming out of this sort of learn in order to work era to work in order to learn continuously. It's not about learning any one skill. It's about the ability to learn and adapt continuously. The implications of that to our identity and how we define ourselves. Implications of that in terms of leadership and how we lead teams, which are now basically learning tours, and removing the artificial barrier between learning and work.
It's interesting because I went to a liberal arts school, and I am looking at some of these small liberal arts schools, and over the last decade or so, they've kind of been panicking around everything's going STEM. What do we do? What's our role? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Coming back out of technology, I'm like, no, this is exactly what we need. Like if we can't train people to see the white space and be creative and learn how to learn, then we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, similarly, my undergraduate degree is in industrial design. So mine's design thinking, design process. It's similar to liberal arts because it's essentially learning how to learn and learning how to think and learning how to adapt and change. I think the challenge with the STEM stuff, and we get into this in the book, is that people have left all the human stuff behind. They've left all the liberal arts behind. They just lunged at technology skills, and that does nothing other than prepare you to compete with robots.
Yeah.
So if you can marry both of them, and we've got a lot of research in there from Burning Glass, that it's the hybrid jobs. It's the ones where you have digital fluency and technical skills, but you also have the uniquely human skills, critical thinking, etc. Because STEM skills alone decline. You may get a premium upon graduation, but you decline over a decade if you don't add some other skills into that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and it's similar to a chart they used to show us back in the 90s about liberal arts and your value over time, and it grows.
Right.
Whereas immediately after school was pretty challenging because you're like looking around and you're like, what do I do with this degree?
Yeah, you have more trouble entering, and we ought to fix that. And then once you enter, you know how to navigate because you know how to learn and adapt.
Yeah,
we found that's not even not simply true of just the STEM skills. Another example I use in the book is lawyers. If you do an undergrad degree in something in the legal field and then you get a law degree, you're at like 1x. If you go with a liberal arts degree or foreign language degree, you get to like 1.3 to 1.5.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And it's also, it's funny because I worked in a management consulting firm early in my career and then got into business school, but it was the .com era. I decided not to go and got into product management and went kind of technical. And then, have done the work that I've been doing for the last decade and never really got back to business school. And I was, a few years ago, it occurred to me that I'm really glad I didn't go to business school because it locks you in to a modality of thinking about how things have to be in the business world.
I would give a caveat. Like I did go to business school, and mine was focused on entrepreneurship. Whereas, how can you create and scale value in that?
I'm not.
Design, but
I'm
yes,
not
right, a lot.
suggesting that business is like any of those things are bad, but I think it does really kind of focus you in an area of established knowledge rather than seeking that new stuff.
Sure, and a lot of business schools do focus on analytical thinking and risk reduction and scaling, and some of those things are really good now. Some of those things will prevent you from seeing a post-coronavirus life. So I'll give a plug for BAPS, and that's where I did my MBA. So fine.
Yeah, and I like the other thing is interesting because I'm watching. I have a 9-year-old, so I'm watching her learn, and she's going to very different schools, very progressive schools, very social, emotional oriented schools, which is fabulous. And it's really just fascinating to watch. And because of the work that I do, I'm like, it's all motivation and connection and collaboration. Because if you have the motivation and you can find the people to work with, you can figure out all the technical stuff, even really complicated technical stuff. In fact, you need more motivation if you're going to figure out the really difficult technical stuff. But if you don't have the motivation.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just on this is my fourth, I think, one of these today. I was just on one with the University of Colorado, and the person I was on said, we really tried to link learning to curiosity and passion. And I said, you just need to restructure that sentence. Learning is curiosity and passion. That should be what you focus on, because if you can light that motivational fire, it's going to work itself out. So I think most of our learning should be focused on helping you find your purpose, your curiosity, your passion, and then how do you add your superpowers? So you start with the why, and then you go to the how, and then the what, and we do it backwards.
Well, so like the interesting thing is it's all about self-efficacy at the end, right? So like my ability to self-direct or self-manage or whatever, and where what's really capturing my attention now is the governance models that we have, because the governance models of organizations that we have right now lock that down, meaning they prohibit you from being curious and mucking around and failing and all the things that are going to extend their capacity. Is even if your direct manager understands the value, they need to report up to somebody on product, like just getting stuff done. And it doesn't even matter what stuff it is, whether it's been done before or not, but somebody did something. And that matters more than somebody learned something.
Yeah, we are chasing productivity and efficiency at our peril.
Yeah. And so like John Stepper, I keep using his term because he created this term, the glass ceiling, for that, which is you eventually bump up into the organizational structure and it beats you down because it not only doesn't allow for it, it's optimized for something else. So a lot of what I'm thinking about these days is, okay, we need different accounting standards, we need different legal standards, we need different policies, we need different management, different leadership. And that's actually the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because everything you've been talking about for years all of a sudden is compressed right now. And everybody's like, oh my God, this isn't 5 years out, this isn't 10 years out, we're not evolving into this, this is now.
Right.
I see so many different reactions to that, both at the individual level and the organizational level. So what advice do you have for people who are now like in this pressure cooker and they
Yeah.
need to adapt quickly.
When Chris and I started, we worked on the book for years and I spoke for years, but it wasn't until this summer that we sort of nailed down, actually, this is what's going to be in the book. And then all of this stuff is not going to be in the book. And this is going to be the focus of the book. And we thought that it was going to be, sort of 3 to 5 years we were talking about. We need to make this. And now it's 3 to 5 weeks. I wrote an article on Forbes that the coronavirus is accelerating the future of work. So when I talk to individuals, one of the things I'm saying lately, and particularly you guys as parents, is give yourself a break.
Mm.
We need to have empathy for ourselves. A lot has happened at once. And I've been using these graphics to explain how work is moving along, who does it, why you do it, how you do it, where you do it, what you do, how many of those things, if like the center of that is, the March 10th before the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. And here we are like way out here. And we actually got way out here in 14 days. First, congratulate yourself what you've already done.
Still being here.
No, you've done a tremendous amount of adaptation. I mean, I talk to my university clients and I'm like, you told me you had faculty that wouldn't teach online. They're all teaching online and many of them are finding they could succeed. We got leaders who say, I don't trust my people to be at home. And you know what? They're trusting them. They're connecting with them. They're being vulnerable with them. Kids run in the background. My dog could jump on my lap at any moment. We're showing up as our authentic selves. My hair color came out of a box. My wife cut my hair. We're all sort of becoming a lot more real than we were before. The impression management armor just dropped. A lot of really good stuff that I see around that. So, but first and foremost, individuals, give yourself a break. You have done a tremendous amount of work in a short period of time.
That's a really great thing to remind ourselves of. And I've been saying something similar, which is, and I see this kind of in the global space, is people who can't have compassion for themselves when pressured and they have this compression to adapt, get angry and judge others because they can't, like it's a psychic break. If you can't have compassion for yourself, you can't have compassion for anyone else. And so that ability to just kind of say, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have, where I am, is, to your point, just the critical first step to being like, change is bumpy.
Yeah, and we've got some great pockets of leadership. We've got some horrible instances of leadership. And the way I've been explaining it to people is like we're standing in front of a raging river and we're at the bank. At the end of the path, whatever path we were already on, that path has come to an end. Yeah. There's no going back to that path. We're not turning around. We got to go across the river. And we're staring at the eddies and then we're looking behind us. And what we really need to do is realize that we've made progress across that river. If you've got your university up online, if you've got your distributed teams, and these are all things that about 29% of us have been able to do, because that's a percentage of us right now that can work from home, realize you've made progress. You started to cross that, and then lift your gaze up. We don't have map for this. We don't. Nobody knows. We don't know how long it's going to take to go across this river. But on the other side of it, if we're intentional and insistent, there can be much better paths than the one we were on. But we need leaders to paint that vision, and we need people to stop and say, give yourself a break. And we need to say, we're doing this sort of incrementally and figuring out as we go along, and we could be designing a better future. That's my hope.
Yeah, this conversation reminded me a little bit of Charlene Lee has been posting some videos on LinkedIn about kind of leadership and what we need and confidence in leadership in ambiguous situations. And I've gotten into a couple of discussions about planning with people, and I'm generally on the side of like, planning? Like, what are you planning for? Like, but to assure people, to calm people, to provide safety, psychological safety for people, they need confidence and a surety. And so how do you think about navigating those two things, which is you don't know what the other side of the river looks like,
right?
But you've got to calm people down to get through it.
As much transparency as possible, as much honesty as possible, and a real clear sense of this is what we're going to do in the next few moments, few weeks. And this is what we've done. I think that we're not doing enough of look at what we've already done. Look how much we've already done.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do that much that quickly without anybody knowing that this was coming at the scale it was coming, imagine what we could do if we could keep that adaptability when we get to the other side of the river and the water's not as rapid and we start to see some solid ground to stand on. We could do anything. We really could.
Well, and on the community side, where I come out is the way you align people is not through process or outputs, it's through purpose, right? So like you're aligning on your values, what you care about, your purpose for being together. And so those things don't change. Your intent doesn't change. How you express that intent may, meaning, I don't know what product, service, whatever somebody needs, a market will need in 6 months. But I know my skills, I know my values, I know my purpose. And I find that's a helpful way to think about grounding people too.
You also know your skills can expand. You know, you have the ability to expand your skills. So some of the better leaders I've seen, we got a friend who owns a trade show company. Now that business has been decimated for some period of time. And I thought when I saw her or talked to her, she would be freaking out. And she said, no, I've never been so excited. I said, why? She said, because I started talking to my team about what are we good at and where's the need and how quickly can we get there for our existing customers or some new customers. And they've just pivoted to find ways to make personal protective equipment, augment testing centers, you know, so instead of doing big trade shows for consumer electronics, they're now doing testing centers for just outside New York because we need to rapidly test people and we need environments to keep them safe in which to do it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And actually one of the things that really struck me is I'm in the middle of our annual research, and to Shannon's credit, she was like, we should go and check on how this whole crisis, because we collected all of our data right before the crisis hit. And she's like, we really need to understand like what the current lens is. And I was like, that is a good idea. And I threw in a question at the end where I was asking people, you know, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah.
Just to kind of do that temperature check of like, where are people? And one of the things that I found most striking and also gratifying, although I'm not sure I had that much to do with it, members of the CR network, our community of community practitioners, were feeling far more proactive and energized and even excited than the population of community professionals as a whole, many of whom were feeling very anxious about. And so it's that, and to me, community does that for you, meaning I didn't do that for them. They did that for each other, because it kind of, everyone has that day where you're kind of going off the ledge. Mm-hmm. And if the community as a whole can pull each member back as that happens, the community as a whole really helps people reframe and restart and take a breather and, you know, whatever. And I like, to me, that was the best you can hope for in this environment, which is turning that anxiety from crippling to excitement, right? Yeah. Like, what are the opportunity? Like, there's always an upside to everything.
Yeah.
And it's helping people see that, I guess. What other things are you hearing from the people you're talking to about what's going on right now? Like, what's on their minds?
There are some people who are saying to me, will we ever go back to work? And we've had lots of conversations about, when we say go back to work, work's been a place, but it hasn't been a place that long when you think about it. You know, we've got 5,000 years of recorded history. Work wasn't a place until very, very recently, but we act like work has always been a place.
Yeah.
And now maybe we will go to a place for work, but we'll have to think why we're going there.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I want to go to a ball game at Fenway Park. You know, I want to gather. I speak in front of people. I want to do that again, as well as to do it virtually. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think there's something in this moment. In some of the webinars I've been doing, I've been using polling and other interactive techniques that allow you to anonymously get information from the people you're talking to in real time, which creates a whole nother conversation that we couldn't have live. And, there's lots of interesting upsides to this. And I think if it only lasted a month, we'd just go back and we'd miss the learning.
Yeah.
The longer it lasts, as painful it is, and I don't mean to diminish the pain of loss of life at all, or loss of income, or any of the desperation that I think's happening or going to happen. But there's something in this pain which we should be learning from. And I think reframing a more inclusive, human-centered workforce that seeks to unleash the human potential in more of us.
It's interesting because I don't know why I'm connected to a strategy person at JLL, which is the big leasing commercial real estate company. And one of our clients is Steelcase. And a few years ago, I was out at the Steelcase headquarters, and they are thinking about that real world collaboration spaces. How do we maximize different groupings, different sizes, different environments? And they have the online internal social network for their employees. So and they have screens that are showing the engagement online and the physical. So they're working on kind of that integration. And then we have all this community data about what happened, if you're trying to get X, what's the social dynamic that you need to create to get it? And I'm like, there's something in there where you could maximize physical space, the office equipment in it, the digital environment, and I'm like, there's this interesting opportunity about physical spaces, given what we've learned about these complex systems online, that I'm intrigued by. And now is not the right time because, we're not going into a building yet. But I think a lot of people are trying to reconfigure their physical space for when we do go back.
Yeah, for the 6 foot apart and then the sneeze guard between everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know how attractive that's going to be.
Well, it's just like the idea of I go in when I need to brainstorm, and brainstorming creativity, you can do it online, but it really is so much better when you have the energy of people in a room kind of getting excited together. So there's, how do we think about maximizing what we're doing for the space that we're inhabiting?
Yeah, it's a great thought. I mean, it's like you have your Zoom cocktails or your Zoom dinner, and it works. It's helpful, but it's not the same. Yeah. But there are some other things that are better. I mean, this Tuesday, I start my first interview with India at 7:00 in the morning, second one 11 a.m. in the UK, 3:00 in the US, and 6 p.m. in Australia. I couldn't do that. There isn't a plane fast enough to do that. So there's some advantages.
So, and I keep saying people are working all wrong, because a lot of these traditional organizations have said, oh, we're just replacing the office with online, and people are on Zoom calls all day. Yeah. I'm like, I don't mind the Zoom calls. I really like that video has come in as one of our tools because it's better than phone calls.
Right.
But I can't sit and stare at my camera for 6 hours a day with and I actually really, and I was thinking about it because my coworker is on Zoom calls a good portion of the day. And I was like, I think I'd go crazy. And what I found is when I do Zoom calls, I really dislike Zoom calls that are more than 5 or 6 people.
Yeah. Because it's distracting.
You can't
where to look or focus your attention, and then you start to zoom out, but you can't zoom out.
And people don't get the same airtime. And I would much rather, with our team, we do a lot of status and collaboration in text that is asynchronous. So all of us who are managing kids and pets and this and that can drop off or come back as we need to and not miss anything. But we also don't have to sit here on a Zoom call and go around and around the room and be like, what did you do lately?
Yeah, I mean, this massive social experiment that's sort of been forced upon us by this invisible agent is allowing us the opportunity to test which tools work and which tools don't, and when we need a tool and when we don't. And as soon as we figure that out, then hopefully it'll become less about the tools and more about what does the human actually do. Because to use John Hagel's world, we're coming out of that scalable efficiency world into the scalable learning world, and we don't have maps for that, but we're figuring it out on the fly right now.
Yeah, and like this kind of speaks to the accounting changes that I'm like mulling about. A few years ago, I was talking to one of my accounting friends, chatting with him, and I was like, where are the people on the asset side of the balance sheet? And he's like, they're not there. And I was like, what do you mean they're not there? In a knowledge economy, if you're only capturing people as liabilities, then oh my God. And then I've been reading this book, Accounting for Slavery, and some of the 1619 stuff, and it's clear amortization was built for people, for because they were a production unit.
Yeah.
And so they used to be on the asset side of the balance sheet, and then it got not really.
And just correspondingly, since about the 70s, we've been treating people like a cost to contain rather than an asset to develop. And there's a lot of evidence in along the lines, even when we switched from physical to knowledge work, there was this sort of idea that fluid intelligence, which peaks at earlier in life, was the only thing that really mattered. And there's some research we show in the book that there's a whole spectrum of cognitive peaks across the lifetime that go into the 70s and later, from reading emotions to concentration to deeply learning things to vocabulary, etc. Because most of the prevailing work we use around cognition is from the 70s.
Interesting.
Born in the 70s. We didn't have cable TV. We didn't have internet. We had far less information coming at us a day. So the shape of our brain has changed and our abilities have changed. So this new research sort of on cognitive peaks is really interesting.
Well, yeah, and my thing is, can we tie that to financial value? Meaning, can we represent that in our accounting? Because if we don't, that is a glass ceiling that is going to keep our organizations from being able to take advantage of and encourage learning and adaptation. It is going to shatter us eventually.
Yeah, and if we start accurately accounting humans, we may start realizing that the explicit knowledge that we lunge at, and often in youth with digital skills, while it's great, we need more of the tacit knowledge that takes longer to develop. That's hard. You can't codify and transfer between humans, and that would come up in more of our older population. I turned 49 a couple weeks ago, so I'm starting to advocate for the seniors.
See, I'm 1 year behind you, and I'm not there yet. So maybe it's the 49th year that does it. We'll see. I'll check in with you next year.
Right.
So let's wrap up. I like asking about like kind of one last thing. What's on your mind? What's piqued my interest in the last week or two? Like, what's your mind kind of chewing on these days?
I am a little bit obsessed right now on what a post-coronavirus world looks like and the opportunity we have to redesign one. One more inclusive, that unleashes more of the potential of humanity, because I think this is the third existential crisis of our lifetimes, or the threat of our lifetimes. The first was climate change, failing a little bit there, income inequality, failing a little bit there. And this virus is the first time that we've paused our economy, and that's not to diminish the world of hurt that causes, to put our most vulnerable first. And in doing that, when we sort of restart or reimagine our economy, we have the potential to do a better job for the climate and better income inequality. And it's not just what's fair and redividing the pie, it's look at the research that better income inequality leads to better economic growth. So we can be unleashing the potential of more of us. So
have you been looking over my shoulder while I've been doing research? Because we finally have financial model for the generative nature of communities, kind of that broad and deep prosperity and value creation, which gets at that, which is, I think this community governance structure is the way organizations need to operate, because it gives every participant in the business model more value than they get out. Because there's this shared value in the middle that gets used by all the different participant. So
and grown, I would imagine.
Huh?
And it grows, I would imagine.
Yes, it's generative, right? It builds. And so then, the cost model goes down as communities age because, the community self-perpetuates value, as it were. One thing that's been on my mind is David Carr just wrote a whole piece in a CIO magazine based on a really kind of off-the-cuff tweet that I had. So PwC had published something about change management, and they had started the paragraph with, when you mandate change. And I was like, well, if that's the way you're going to phrase it, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And the piece wasn't all about that and had some great points underneath it. But I was really keyed off that word of you're going to mandate change.
Yeah.
And anyways, that whole experience I got me thinking about how some of the most profound aha moments that we have are these little nuggets that don't mean anything to the person who originally posted them.
Yeah.
That is the thing that helps somebody just reframe something in a way that they're oh, and it led me to go back to, well, what helped me see that same aha moment? And I use this image in presentations a lot when I'm talking about change management and how communities help co-create it, which kind of changed the whole nature of how quickly you can do it. But I use this picture of my daughter. I had my camera ready because the first time I fed her something, I fed her applesauce. And I knew it was going to be a funny reaction. And you can probably imagine what the reaction was. Yes, exactly. And I'm like, babies have no artifice. So you get exactly the emotional reaction. And I'm like, but I think we're all doing that. If you tell any of us what to do, somebody may smile at you. But inside they're going, tell me what to do. And so I use that a lot. And again, it was the same type of thing for me. It was this little moment. And I'm like, babies don't like it. Adults really don't like it. But we have the structural controls that kind of force us to like it.
Yeah.
But independent of that, we wouldn't change. And sometimes we don't change even with the force. So, well, it was great to catch up. I hope the rest of your launch goes really well. I encourage everybody to check it out. I need to go get myself a copy. I have a book. I'm one of those. I have a book stack of
me too.
unread books. So it will get on that stack. But have a great weekend, and thank you for sharing your information. For those of you who don't know Heather, or this is your first experience with her, the charts and graphs that she has to explain some of this stuff are just phenomenal. They really help kind of distill it into understandable chunks. So thank you. And I hope the book tour, the worldwide book tour goes well.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time. Good to see you. Take care. Okay. Bye.